Coming up on Network Africa, ousted Mali President Keita freed 10 days after mutinying soldiers unseated him from power. Former Côte d'Ivoire rebel leader Guillaume Soro urges France to intervene on President Alassane Ouattara's third-term bid. Plus, a man arrested in London on suspicion of Liberia war crimes. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. 10 days after mutinying soldiers unseated him from power, Mali's military junta has released President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita and allowed him to return to his residence in the capital, Bamako. The junta, which calls itself the National Committee for the Salvation of the People, made the announcement on Facebook. Keita, who was overthrown in an August 18 coup, had been in military custody. According to reports, he is still being guarded by the army officers since his release late Wednesday. The Economic Community of West African States, which has led efforts to solve the political crisis in the country, had called for his release earlier. It had initially also demanded his reinstatement as president, but softened its stance after meeting with the junta in the capital, Bamako, over the weekend. The 75-year-old dissolved his government and resigned under pressure from soldiers who detained him for hours after they staged a mutiny at an army barracks on the outskirts of Bamako. He was elected to office in 2013, just over a year after his predecessor, Amadou Toumani Touré, was himself ousted in a coup. Meanwhile, France's foreign minister says the transition in Mali needs to be quick, but that the coup d'etat in the country would not stop French military operations targeting Islamist militants. The leaders of the military coup that ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita in Mali told a delegation of West African mediators that they want to stay in power for a 3-year transition period. Jean-Yves Le Drian says West African mediation had to be concluded quickly to restore some stability because it was indispensable to continue the fight against Islamist militants. Former colonial power France has some 5,100 troops in the Sahel region, with a large portion operating from Mali, where it intervened in 2013 to stop an Islamist militant advance on the capital. All right, we'll have more on this situation in Mali. We'll have security expert David Odo joining us later, but still in West Africa, 111 Boko Haram terrorists and Islamic State of West Africa province elements in the northeast of Nigeria have been killed by the armed forces of the country. Addressing a news conference in Abuja, the nation's capital, the coordinator of Defense Media Operations, Major General John Eneche, disclosed this, insisting that the concerted efforts of security agencies in the country is daily degrading remnants of Boko Haram terrorists. General Eneche adds that within the last 1 month, 155 bandits have also been arrested in the northwest zone of the country.
Within the period in the northwest zone, a total of 155 bandits were arrested. No fewer than 25 of them were killed, and over 1,000 livestock were recovered. These successes recorded within the period are evident to the troops' resolve, doggedness, and determination to end the security challenges in the Northwest, and by extension for the armed forces of Nigeria all over the country. Meanwhile, it is noteworthy that the comprehensive airstrikes executed by the Air Task Force of Operation Lafia on terrorist enclaves at various locations, especially with the launching of Operation Hailstorm in the Northeast, have yielded tangible results. The airstrikes, which were conducted with a package of Nigerian Air Force fighter jets and helicopter gunships, cumulatively killed no fewer than 111 BHT and ISWAP elements, including 15 of their high-ranking commanders, which include the ISWAP Naval Commander Abu Imrana, Malam Abba, and Malam Ibrahim. This is in addition to several others neutralized in the devastating air bombardments directed at structures used by terrorists as hideouts and administrative headquarters, as well as training camps.
To politics now, French President Emmanuel Macron has been urged to intervene in Côte d'Ivoire's President Alassane Ouattara's bid for a third term in October elections, which his opponents say is unconstitutional. Former rebel leader Guillaume Soro has told President Macron in an open letter that Ivorians have noticed France's deafening silence on the matter. He says France and hailed Mr. Ouattara's initial announcement that he should not seek re-election, but had been quiet after the president accepted his party's nomination for a third term. Mr. Soro, who has been barred from vying, was convicted in absentia in April 2020 of embezzlement and money laundering. Meanwhile, supporters of the former president Laurent Gbagbo in Côte d'Ivoire say they will file his candidacy for October's election, even though a court has ruled he is not eligible to stand due to a previous conviction. The country descended into civil war after the 2010 election when Mr. Gbagbo refused to step down and hand over to the victor, Alassane Ouattara. Last year, he was acquitted by the International Criminal Court of Crimes Against Humanity and currently lives in Belgium, pending a possible appeal by the prosecution. He was sentenced in absentia by an Ivorian court to a 20-year term for looting a regional bank during the 2010 post-election crisis. Well, we have joining us now on the program, Leandro Bassompierre joins us now to speak more on Guillaume Soro's open letter to French President Emmanuel Macron. Hello, Leand. Thank you so much for speaking to us. So where is this coming from? I'm asking about the letter from Guillaume Soro. Is this a popular belief or suggestion among citizens?
Well, Guillaume Soro maintains that he remains a candidate in the upcoming elections, but of course he is still in France and has not said when exactly he will return to Ivory Coast. Of course, he still faces a 20-year jail term should he arrive in the country. So he would want to secure that once he arrives here, that he won't go straight to prison. He, of course, has called on France to help, to see what they can do. At the same time, President Alassane Ouattara is in that country at the moment. He is likely to meet with Emmanuel Macron. I don't think that it's a general sentiment that they want France to intervene. Ivorians generally want to be able to hold peaceful elections that are organized by themselves, that politicians and even opposition politicians want to make sure are free and fair.
Well, back in 2010, France reportedly influenced ECOWAS in removing Laurent Gbagbo. Is it likely that France will also be intervening in this year's polls and their own man Ouattara is running again?
Well, when President Alassane Ouattara first said in March that he wouldn't be running, Emmanuel Macron took to Twitter praising him for deciding that. He's been relatively quiet since August 6th, when President Alassane Ouattara said that he would be going for a third term, of course, in the wake of Prime Minister Amadou Gon Coulibaly's death last month. He was, of course, the ruling party candidate. So it has changed the playing field somewhat. The party had been preparing, rallying around Amadou Gon Coulibaly, but it remains to be seen whether there will be any influence from France. We do know that before he came back from quite a long medical stay in France, one of the last people that Amadou Gon Coulibaly, that is, saw was the French Minister for Africa. One of the first people he saw when he came back to the country was the French ambassador. So, of course, there are very strong ties between the country. Whether they will influence the election, it remains to be seen.
Bassompierre, thank you for speaking to us there from Abidjan. Moving on to Liberia, a man has been arrested in London on suspicion of war crimes during the Liberian civil wars. According to Scotland Yard, the 45-year-old man is accused of offences relating to the country's first and second civil wars between 1989 and 2003. He is being held on suspicion of war crimes contrary to Section 51 of the International Criminal Court Act 2001. Officers from the Met's War Crimes team also say they are searching an address in southeast London. About 250,000 people died during the two civil wars in Liberia from 1989 to 1996 and 1999 to 2003. The country's former president, Charles Taylor, was later jailed in the UK for committing war crimes in neighboring Sierra Leone. Well, let's go back to the political situation in Mali. We have joining us now David Otto. He's a security expert. Thank you so much, David, for standing by. David, President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has just been released by the military after a week of arrest. The military leaders are insisting they want to stay in power for a 3-year transition period. What do you think about that?
Of course, we've just seen the official announcement by the National Committee for the Salvation of the People of Mali, which is abbreviated as the CNPS. You know, they have released an official statement that IBK, that's Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, the former president who was deposed, has now been released. And this news follows a recent meeting with the ECOWAS, led by ex-president of Nigeria, Goodluck Jonathan. Now, the important message to get here is that a lot of people are now giving kind of, the analysis on this, thinking that perhaps, this may have been a decision which, was maybe agreed between the CNPS, which is the junta, and Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, because, just a week after his supposed coup d'etat against him, he's now been released, and perhaps I think this was to save him from the humiliation of a resignation, and the glory, the peaceful nature of the coup itself, might be a demonstration that this was perhaps something better than a humiliating resignation for Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, which of course is good for Malians.
David, how do you think this whole situation will now, affect the country's security landscape, especially as Mali continues to deal with insecurity of Tuareg rebels?
There's one thing to, take out the president. There's another thing to deal with the underlying issues. We know that there is a huge presence of Al Qaeda in these, in the Greater Sahel. We've also got the ISIS faction, which is in the northern part of the country. Don't forget the political instability and the issues of corruption that led to the protest, which eventually, of course, led to what we can now call a supposed coup. I don't think we've got to, give the time for this military junta, perhaps to hand over power to a civilian government that will be able to deal with these issues. There are several issues in Mali which, of course, cannot just be dealt with by Malians themselves. And now you have the threat of a sanction from ECOWAS. So I think the problems are huge. And even if you give the junta 3 years to deal with this, I still don't think it's sufficient. I don't think it's the number of years that the juntas really need. I think it's about planning and trying to make sure that some of the underlying issues which Malians have been complaining about during the time of IBK are being dealt with. But it has to take time, to be honest.
David, just very quickly, we speak a lot about international interference in Mali, and this isn't the second or first coup the country has experienced. Interestingly, the people seem happy with this military intervention. Do you think regional leaders are wasting their time trying to find lasting solution to this country's political crisis?
I think the issues in Mali should be dealt with by Malians. It has to be an issue that needs to be supported rather than something which needs to be made worse by the international community. I think the presence of France in the region is something which needs to be reevaluated. The presence of the European Union, the presence of other parties. Of course, ECOWAS has a role to play, and they're playing their role quite well. But whether the role that they play is in the interest of Malians, is left to be seen. But ultimately, what I think the external parties, I've seen them having meetings with the CNSP junta. I think what they need to do is to be able to support the way forward for Malians, so that the underlying issues which led to all this chaos, can be dealt with. That's my opinion on this matter.
All right, David Otto, security expert. Thank you so much for your thoughts on Network Africa.
Thank you. Thank you.
Still ahead on Network Africa. Quarantine Comedy Club, the Kenyan comedians adapt during COVID-19 pandemic with Quarantine Comedy Club. Welcome back to the program. Shops and malls in Rwanda's capital, Kigali, have been ordered to operate at 50% capacity and on rotational basis following a surge in coronavirus cases. Public transport between the capital and other districts has been prohibited. A dusk to dawn curfew has also been extended by 2 hours. It will now start at 7 p.m. local time. Rwanda's coronavirus infection has been rising with nearly 1,000 new cases confirmed in the last 7 days, and most of the cases were from markets in the capital, Kigali. Now, the World Food Programme says serious hunger and malnutrition looms for millions of refugees across Eastern Africa who depend on assistance from the food agency to survive. It says that the socio-economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has reduced vital funding from donors. The WFP has already reduced food or cash transfers by up to 30% for more than 2.7 million refugees in Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, South Sudan, and Djibouti. According to the WFP Eastern African Regional Director, refugees are especially vulnerable to the spread of COVID-19 because they are crowded together in camps with weak or inadequate shelter, health services, and access to clean water and sanitation. Well, unfortunately, 7 more dead dolphins have been found on a Mauritius beach a day after 17 carcasses were washed up near an oil spill caused by a Japanese ship that struck a coral reef. The spill came from the Japanese-owned MV Wakashio, which ran aground on July 25th and began to spill oil about a week later. On Twitter, Greenpeace called on the government of Mauritius to launch an urgent investigation to determine the cause of deaths and any ties to the Wakashio oil spill. The full impact of the spill is still unfolding, but scientists have warned to brace for a major ecological disaster in the area, which could impact Mauritius and its tourism-dependent economy for decades. A well-known South African conservationist has died after he was mauled by 2 white lions as he was taking them for a walk. The wife of West Matthew Sin, who followed in a car, tried to distract the lions, but it was too late. According to reports, a lioness became aggressive towards the other and then turned her attention to the conservationist, affectionately known as Uncle West. He ran a popular safari lodge, Lion Tree Top Lodge, in Limpopo province of South Africa. The lioness has since been moved to another game lodge and are expected to be released into the wild at a later date. Well, being under lockdown could be quite tiring and boring. That's why a group of Kenyan comedians have set up a virtual quarantine comedy club, which broadcasts live every night from a Nairobi hotel. Stand-up comedy performances without an audience was a challenge at first in the country, but this group of talented comedians has gained a committed following on social media.
Come here so that you can see. There's breaking news.
Kenyan comedians Sleepy David and Victor Bear were accustomed to crowds laughing at jokes at their stand-up shows in bars and theatres in the capital, Nairobi. But the pandemic has now forced them to ditch their open stage for shows filmed in a hotel bar. The performances are streamed straight onto their Facebook accounts.
So for us, this is more of an innovation. It's just like how the business scene has changed. Most people have lost their jobs, and you just need to be able to see the possibilities in the impossibilities. Yeah, and that's what I think Quarantine Comedy Club represents.
Bear and Sleepy David are part of the 254 Quarantine Comedy Club, whose performers rely on viewers leaving comments on their sites to gauge how well their jokes have been received.
We're using webcams and just like a free software. Yeah, everything goes straight into the software, and the show goes on. The cameras are not, we don't have cameramen. We only have someone controlling the software, and the cameras are there and microphones.
In place of ticket sales at the door, the group now has a mobile money account that scrolls across the screen asking viewers to send in donations.
Here we are, 9 weeks later, performing without an audience, and guys are enjoying the show, guys are loving it, and we are grateful for all the support that guys are giving us.
The comedians say even after COVID-19 subsides, they will keep their newfound online avenue.
Aderitomiwa Oyatomi is a sculptor who creates replicas of famous bridges and monuments in the world using spaghetti, a skill he developed in March when Nigeria went into lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. The 33-year-old hopes his art reminds people of exciting destinations to visit after movement restrictions are eased.
These sculptures replicate landmarks from various countries in the world. They were created using one of the world's favorite foods, spaghetti. The non-edible sculptures are painstakingly put together by Lagos-based visual artist and sculptor Aderitomiwa Oyatomi. His first pasta-inspired sculpture was a replica of the Eiffel Tower. He created it in March, the first month of Nigeria's lockdown due to the novel coronavirus. The 33-year-old has since created over 5 global landmarks using over 25,000 strands of spaghetti.
I just want to show the world that these places are great architectural pieces because it's beautiful and they are made with, great techniques, because they are kind of very different from every other thing that we know. And the second thing is just want to relate to people about these places where you can visit when you get to this exact country.
Oyatomi says each piece takes 2 to 3 days to make, depending on its size and complexity. He also reveals that he tried using broomsticks and matchsticks, but neither of them produced the look he wanted. Most people in Africa's most populated country live under $3 a day. The country is experiencing rising inflation, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Oyatomi says many do not approve of his use of food for art.
People thinking my kind of art is waste is maybe they don't really have the knowledge of what I'm trying to show to people. What I'm just trying to show to people is just an expression that even if you are fragile, you can still stand when you are being close together. When you can hold yourself together, then you can still stand.
Oyatomi also teaches virtual painting and drawing classes for his children alongside his pastor part-time.
And that's where we end the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke. Bye for now.